Nobody shall wield Excalibur but me!
I've never actually been a big fan of Arthurian legends, and I think partly it's because it's an English legend, so it's not exactly exotic or, you know, maybe too used to it, probably seen too much of it in popular culture. And I think the other reason was because I'd never ever heard of this movie, Excalibur. And this movie is fucking crazy. With the incredible cast, the director of Deliverance, you know, I think this was only 1 or 2 movies apart from Deliverance, which is a crazy, like, I don't think you'd pair those 2 movies together if you were just following the directing style.
No.
This movie is truly epic, not just in running time, but in scope. It covers decades, generations even.
Yeah.
The boy drew the sword. If a boy has been chosen, a boy shall be king!
Boorman, the director, was a huge fan of Arthurian legends, and it was always his dream project. And you can see how usually you would have to water down this sort of story, because as brilliant and complex and fascinating a lot of, you know, classical legends like Beowulf.
Oh yeah.
You know, these old epic poems or old epic classics, like or Greek legends, you know, from those eons. They're fascinating stories, and they got these interesting details and analogies with them. But you know, they weren't written in mind with modern storytelling conventions. They don't care about keeping hold of a viewer's attention necessarily, or details in a plot that will come up later, and you know, those sort of things. And what I loved about this is that it didn't feel like it was shying away or trying to make the old legends fit into a film as you know it. It felt true to the narrative of the old legends.
Yeah.
Even the way at various points your main character Arthur would just drop away out of the movie for a bit, and you'd follow Percival, or you'd follow, you know, his father for the first 20 minutes of the movie. And it just covers everything. It covers the Holy Grail. It covers the Sword in the Stone. It covers Lancelot. It covers the Lady in the Water. It just, it fits everything in. And it is also, on top of it, it's got an amazing cast, but it is done in, it felt more like a 70s experimental movie than an 80s movie. I was kind of expecting, seeing 81 and the image when I was Googling it first, because this was a viewer requested movie to do. No, neither of us had ever seen this before. And I kind of thought this was going to be a schlocky, over the top Conan the Barbarian, but set in England sort of movie. And it's not at all. It is absolutely insane.
When I first started watching it, Declan, I did have, in the first few minutes, I did have some concerns, because it did look like, as you said, a sort of 70s movie that would not go to the cinema but straight to TV, like kind of thing, the way they were like trekking about, and I was like, please. But then it developed, and I was like, this is going to be good.
I know what you mean, because sometimes when you see you see a shot where they've got a bunch of fog machines and filmed it at night, you kind of think, okay, that's usually, not usually, but often done to hide the fact that we only had 7 extras. So I was a bit like, But as the movie goes on, when it does a lot of odd things for stylistic choices and creative choices. And, you know, it was an £11 million budget, which wasn't small by any means back then.
The sword! You promised me the sword! And you shall have it. But the heel, not the hack.
Part of what I was really enjoying was the pace this moves at. Because often you'll cut to a scene and you'll cut away from a scene and suddenly it's just, it might be a minute later, it might be decades later.
Yeah.
And it's just done like that, and you have no time to sit and rest and digest whatever wacky thing just happened. Like, even from the opening, you're following Gabriel Byrne playing King Arthur's father. I would happily watch a movie just about this character in this incarnation, because he is just a fucking beast of a man.
Yeah.
In a good sense and a bad sense. we opened a film where he's like you said, he's waging a battle, and it seems like the last battle in a long war, it's for the conquest. Who's going to be basically the king, the dominant ruler in the land? And Arthur's dad wins. The other guy submits to him. They have a peace treaty where he gets a little bit of land, so everyone's happy. So to celebrate, they're like, right, they're just best mates now. So they're like, right, let's go to my castle, have a drink.
King Uther, let us feast together. To my castle.
Everything's good. Merlin is there as his right-hand man. And the reason Arthur's dad has been able to absolutely bulldozer over everyone is because he has Excalibur. Yeah, which is a sword which I guess wasn't made by anyone. It's kind of nearly like a weapon of God or a weapon that God works through, if that makes sense. It's got very otherworldly sort of connotations. It's not even so much what you can do with it as a weapon. It's more, it seems to bestow luck and an aura in whoever owns it or whoever is holding it.
Yeah, because I took it as if you have Excalibur basically, and there's a bit later on we'll talk about at the end, obviously, that you can't really be beaten in a way. So it's just I don't know, as you said, if that's true, or maybe whoever holds it, I don't know, this can sound weird, it's still so much confidence in them that they just cannot be beaten. Yeah, but there must be like another.
But it's still reflective of your character and the choices you're making as well. Like it's not just going to go along with whatever you want to do. If you're not virtuous, it can work against you with the same powers. But anyway, it's worked for Arthur's dad because he's taken over the land and he's all happy and everything's good. Merlin's talking about, finally been working on bringing peace to the land and you being the supreme leader for years. And then in an instance, basically this little lower guy that he's beaten, who's invited them all back to his castle to have a drink, idiot. He's just like, let me get my hot wife out to dance for everyone. Which is like, and what do you think's going to happen?
And well, Arthur's just battered him in a battle. So
it's not like he's the big swinging dick.
Yeah, he's going to be like adrenaline pumping, hyped up to the nines, and then he just sees this fit woman. And then, obviously, he's just going to be like, I want that as well.
My wife will dance for us! I must have her. Are you mad? The Alliance!
He's just like, immediately, I must have her. He's getting so like hot and bothered. He's shouting it pretty much at the table.
I must have her. And risk everything you've won.
And Merlin's pulling his hair out like, what do you mean, man? Are you seriously going to throw away just for this?
Yeah.
He doesn't want to marry her, he just wants one night of her. And in an instance, we're at war. And the next scene is them laying siege to the castle, catapults firing, burning rocks into the castle, and men shooting arrows, and people dying, and the king's laying siege outside. Merlin's pissed because he's just like, really?
Yeah.
Like, why have you done this? And the look on the Queen's face says it all as she's sitting in the castle listening to the battering ram smashing the doors, and she just knows there's a whole army beating down the doors just so the king can come in and shag her. She just looks fucking terrifying.
I don't get like about this whole thing. If Merlin's meant to be that powerful, how he couldn't like use his magic to like make him stop doing it? Kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, whenever in mythology in general, there's always
a catch to.
There's always a catch because otherwise you have that Superman problem in like the comic books where he's a bit boring because he's just too strong.
Yeah, exactly.
Because really, these stories, it never happened, or maybe it was loosely based on someone. I think that some historians think it might have been based on a Roman centurion that came over, but these stories are metaphorical, really, and Merlin's there as a like just a narrative device to get things going at certain points.
It's essentially like.
But that is true. Like, what is Merlin? Is he a man? Is he a man that became a wizard?
It's essentially like.
Because he doesn't seem to age or live, and he speaks about men as if they're a completely different species.
But Merlin. Now, getting on to him, the actor that plays him in this film is fantastic. I like the way they portray him as not as like a like a long-haired, sort of grey-haired wizard.
I like that as well.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. He never seems to age, as you said, but he reminds me, the actor's very good in this. He's such a snake. Like, I don't know.
He isn't. That's what's great about this as well.
Me.
Is this felt like if it did happen at some point in real life, this is how it would have happened. Because the characters range from absolute brutal monsters to complex people trying to do good. Even when later on, when Arthur is, a really noble, proud king who's at his absolute pomp of his powers and his confidence. Even then, everyone's very malleable and liable to natural human shortcomings.
Yeah.
And Lancelot is basically like the annoying douchebag L'Oreal commercial looking.
Yeah. All the birds fancy him.
But he's also an absolute, like, he'll beat you in a fight and then help you back up and then steal your misses, but not mean to. He's just a godly like figure. But even he ends up falling prey to a lust later on in the story.
Yeah, maybe it's. I guess that lust. I guess that the whole point of the story was.
Absolutely.
You can be as powerful as you want, but there's if you give in to your vices, you're not a virtuous man that you think you are, kind of thing. Well, I don't know.
Like the moral of the story is, you'll see it comes up time and time again, is don't think of your dick, because it will fuck everything up.
You have a land to quell before you can start all this hair pulling and jumping about.
So getting back to that, Arthur's dad is thinking of his dick, and he is trying to get into the castle. And they give up one night because he's just like, all right, let's not give up, but they're like, let's fall back a bit. And he basically says to Merlin, use your magic. Come on, man, like, give me something, give me some magic here. And we'll learn that whenever magic takes place, or whenever a magical item like Excalibur is misused, there's always some price to pay.
What issues from your lust shall be mine. Swear it again. I swear it!
Merlin makes it so that he will appear as the Duke, who is the husband of the wife he's trying to shag. And he's going to sneak into the castle. Meanwhile, his troops have lured the Duke and his men away. He rides towards the castle over the sea, which is a shooting stage with loads of fog machines going off. And he's riding on his horse and he gallops up the mountain, and he now resembles the Duke and fucking smashes the Queen. She's loving it because she thinks it's her husband as well.
Yeah.
Who she loves. But you can tell there's a look on her face where she's a bit like, you don't usually shag me like this. This is crazy.
Yeah, I get that. But wouldn't she...
And
I don't know, wouldn't she think, like, you've got back quick from, like, I don't know, like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
anyway,
but when
this is
in the moments of passion, you don't really think.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then it's this crazy scene where they're having sex. They're absolutely going at it. And it's intercut with scenes of the Duke, who's been ambushed by Arthur's dad's men, and he's been stabbed and he's dying and he's bleeding to death, and it keeps cutting from him crying out in pain to them having sex. And then it starts cutting to their daughter, who is having a premonition seemingly in the other room. She's woken up from what seems like a nightmare, but she keeps saying, my father's died. And you immediately get an inkling like, oh, she's psychic.
My father's dead.
Yes, we cut to 9 months later, and a child has been born by the Queen. So the king is kind of like taking the baby, and I guess he's just technically visiting because, the Duke's dad's dead. The Duke is dead. But she doesn't know that he's the father. You can tell by the way she's looking at him and the way he's acting around the kid that she has suspicions, even though it doesn't make sense.
All I know is how to butcher men. From now on, I shall learn to love them.
Then Merlin shows up out of nowhere, and apparently the price or the debt that has to be paid for doing the magic, the price would be that Merlin's going to come along and take the babby. Which is a really fucked up scene as you're watching you know, the baby get ripped out of the mother's arms and she's screaming, and, you know, she was essentially raped to conceive the baby on the same night as her husband was murdered, and now she's just had the baby ripped out of her arms the moment it was born. Like, it's completely fucked up.
No! Why?
Take the devil, child!
No! Why a baby?
Like, I do think he loves the baby, and at first he doesn't want to give the kid up, but he kind of hands it to Merlin like, well, that's the way it's got to be, I don't like it, but whatever. But you can see then he regrets it, and he goes off chasing after Merlin with his men, and he ends up getting ambushed.
Yeah.
And we see the first real proper fight scene that you can visibly see. The opening one you can't really see too well. You see the first daytime fight battle in the movie, and I love the fight scenes in this film. They've got the practical effects and aesthetic feel of the Black Knight scene from Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
But in a serious format, and I just love it, like the way you're just seeing
Arms
clearly
coming
fake
off.
arms
Yeah,
getting hacked off, and a little hose pumping blood out afterwards, and it's just great. He's stabbed a few times and he's come through his armour, and as he's dying, he picks up Excalibur and smashes it into a rock.
Nobody shall wield Excalibur but me!
So, we cut forward 20 years, I guess.
Yeah.
And we see this goofy looking squire who turns out to be Arthur. And when I looked at him, I was a bit like, okay, so this is the hero of the movie? And then he speaks, and he literally sounds like just this goofy, bumbling idiot.
A good squire doesn't forget his knight's sword.
I left it in the tent, Father.
Well, hurry then and get it.
Like, he sounds like he'd be the character who says something stupid and then is a coward and then dies to make the hero look better. Up to this point, I've been completely drawn in. I was like, I'm loving this film. And then the moment I realised, like, this guy was supposed to be the hero that I'm going to follow for the next 2 hours, I just kind of deflated. I was like, I do not like this character.
And number 2, he had a full-blown Irish accent.
Was it Irish?
Yeah, I think it sounded Irish to me. I was like...
It sounded more like generic medieval guy to me. Like,
Stolen.
So this is the guy, and I'm immediately like, I'm not sure about this guy, but whatever. He's the hero of the movie, so I've got to follow him. So he, through pretty much like kind of dumb circumstance, accidentally pulls the sword out of the stone, kind of.
Yeah.
And even that, again, I was a bit like, that was really uneventful, considering it's the most iconic visual of the whole tale. Do you know what I mean? Like, pulling the sword from the stone is the big thing. And he just kind of like, he pulls it out like he was getting a butter knife out of the kitchen drawer. Like, it was just a bit like, ugh.
And the knight he's squire for basically had followed him, and the guy rides up who's like his dad, but he doesn't know like who
his adopted father.
Yeah, his adopted father is, doesn't know who his real dad is, and just goes, this is how pathetic Arthur is. It's kind of like tallies up on Declan's point. Goes, Did you pull that sword from the stone? And he goes, no. And then the knight guy he's with goes, I did. And he goes, no, it was Arthur. And then the adopted dad goes, well, put it back. And he just puts it back into the stone.
Yeah, and he's a bit freaked out. So anyway, all the people surround him, and they're like, you should be king. Blah, blah, blah. Merlin shows up, and Merlin's like, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tutor you. I'm the one who actually brought you to who you thought was your dad all this time. And understandably, Arthur just freaks out, runs off with the sword. Merlin follows him, and he just hides out in the woods for a couple of days. And he kind of eventually comes around to the idea of being king. And Merlin's kind of like trying to guide him a bit. And he's saying, so what do you think we should do? And he starts going through strategy in his head. And he thinks, well, that one guy, Patrick Stewart, seemed alright. He seemed on my side a bit. All the other knights didn't seem to like me. But Patrick Stewart was alright. So, and he's like, and Merlin's like, yeah, well, they're all beating the shit out of him right now at his castle because he was siding with you. Oh, well, let's go help him then. And it was this point onwards where I started actually getting behind Arthur. because even though he still had that goofy face and goofy voice, he just suddenly started making decisions and taking chances and taking charge and beating the shit out of people. Like, he just runs in without armour. As this army's laying siege to Jean-Luc Picard's castle. And he just runs in without armour and starts fucking up everyone. Patrick Stewart's daughter's watching it and she starts getting all horned up watching him.
I thought some of this scene, some of it was still quite comedic though.
Like what? Do you know, just before you say that, I love the way, as Merlin and him are walking through the woods discussing this, they just stumble upon an army.
Yeah.
And they're like, we'll follow you.
Exactly, and then like he's climbing up like the scaffolding, and then like, Merlin's like, grab the hook, and he like just turns around with like a goofy smile, just like fucks someone up, and, like just grabs the hook and goes and continues to just fuck.
And it's funny,
up.
like the fight scenes, it goes between sometimes.
It's
people are getting beheaded and arms getting lopped off in really good practical effects, and then other times they do that thing movies sometimes do from that era where they just kind of like hit the sword against each other and a guy falls down dead without any blood or penetration.
Hit the armour and like you'll just hear like a clinking noise and they'll just go, oh!
Yeah, or
like drop dead. Like.
Or just cut to another shot where they've rubbed blood onto him and just like have him fall on the floor.
Swear faith to me!
He ends up beating all their men back and he finds himself in a river and he's got one of the knights by a sword and he tells them, submit to me, I don't want to kill you, you can work for me, I need men like you. And they're basically saying, no, you're not a knight, you're some dirty little goofy peasant boy, we ain't submitting to you. And again, this is one of the things where I was like, okay, I like this guy, is he takes a sword and he puts Excalibur into the hand of this knight. And the other ones are kind of like going to him like, kill him, go on, you've got the sword, he's unarmed. But you see the look on the guys, and he's so taken aback that he's taken this chance that he just thinks, fuck it, do you know what, yeah. And he, on the spot, he knights him. And being a knight, they all, by the rules of being a knight, I guess, are allowed to submit to Arthur. And Arthur's king.
That duty I will solemnly obey, as knight and king.
I never saw this.
In the space of like whatever 5 minutes it was, it really does kind of do the whole transition of him kind of being like a poor peasant boy from the woods to go into the battle, earning his legend and then becoming ruler. So I think it was a great sequence overall, and it just fit everything in.
It worked.
Yeah, it works. Yeah.
So then they have a couple of more battles as they're kind of like putting down all the last spots in the land to unify the land. And after this big battle, at night, around this huge fire, they decide to set up the Knights of the Round Table.
Yeah, so they're all around the fire, and they're
Have they met Lancelot yet?
No, he comes later on, I think.
No, I think he comes... Maybe he doesn't.
They're all around the fire, and then he's like, we're all in a circle here celebrating victory. I will keep this circle for all of my life. I will make a round table.
I will build a round table where this fellowship shall meet. And a hall about the table. And a castle about the hall.
And I was like, nice way to get it across. Yeah, like that as well.
And you see, Arthur keeps going through these lessons. Like, again, he's not a perfect dude. Like, he comes across this knight who's just sort of travelling through, and he's in, like... You can tell straight away he's going to be a badass because he's in the shiniest... Like, it's just got a different sort of gleam to it than everyone else's, and it turns out it's Lancelot, and he's kind of walking through life. He's a bit like a medieval One Punch Man, where he's depressed and lethargic because he can't find his someone better than him. Every person he's ever faced in combat, he's beaten without even really getting a sweat on. He ends up challenging Arthur. And they're having a fight and swinging swords about, and Arthur is getting his ass whooped. And he gets beaten, but even Lancelot says he doesn't want to kill him, he just says submit, and he's being very... He's clearly like a very virtuous, noble man, but Arthur's getting more and more pissed off. In the end, he's gonna lose, like he's been beaten down, and Lancelot is gonna kill him. So he asks the sword, Excalibur, with its power, to help him win the fight. And Excalibur makes it so that he wins and defeats Lancelot, and as he thinks Lancelot's dead at this point, but in the process he breaks the blade. And I loved him and Merlin start like arguing and being worried about it, and I love the idea that the reason the sword broke was because he messed with the course of reality.
Yeah.
Like, the timeline is supposed to be that he lost that fight. Lancelot was meant to win it.
Yeah.
And he fucked with the order of events in the universe. That caused the blade to snap in half. Didn't really understand what the lady in the water was, though, because next he throws the blade away and this projector puts a woman onto the water and she rises up and gives the blade fixed back to him. And I guess gives him a second chance, is it?
Yeah, what I thought about the blade, I thought your point makes more sense than mine. I thought maybe it broke, or then the lady in the water gave it back to him. But I thought the reason it broke itself is because it didn't want to... We find out that Lancelot isn't dead. I thought it snapped itself because Lancelot was actually the virtuous one in this whole situation and didn't want to kill Arthur. It just broke itself so he couldn't use it to end his life.
Well, maybe that's interesting.
Yeah,
I was wondering if the blade if maybe Lancelot had died and the blade being fixed happened at the same time as essentially Lancelot was revived by the lady in the water.
That would also
but again,
make
I'm
sense.
not really sure. It's kind of fun to
have
it's
different
so
theories.
vague.
Yeah.
Maybe people that know the actual history of the legends better will be able to give the details, because obviously the movie covers so much you can't stop and spend any amount of time really on any particular thing. But anyway, Lancelot comes to and they become best mates. Yeah. Really best mates, and he becomes his most respected knight in all the table. And he's so respected, the way they talk about him, they're pretty much openly, even the king himself and others talk about that he's even more virtuous than the king and King Arthur. Yeah. But at this point, King Arthur's kind of shed his goofy accent and they've aged him. And by the way, the practical aging effects on the actor playing Arthur was fantastic. Like, you really believe he's a 17-year-old up to about, I think, 50s, 60s. Yeah, he's supposed to be in the end of the movie. Really well done. Like, shit's on the Irishman like 40 years later. But yeah, so they have the round table, and the next period of the movie is kind of a time of everything going well.
Yeah, everything's going well in the kingdom. All the kind of like poorer people, peasants, are all cool. No one's uprising.
Camelot's like thriving.
Crops are... There's loads of crops.
Yeah, there's loads of mead going about.
If there's food, if you keep your population fed and watered, you're gonna be cool essentially. So everyone's blessed, and then they're all sitting round a round table, and snaky little Merlin's like snaking around, like darting about, and essentially everyone from a round table's bored out of their mind because they're in a time of peace and prosperity. And obviously these guys are knights, so they're used to like fucking shit up and fucking people up. So when it's like peace times, they're like, well, I'm bored. And even Arthur says, Merlin, like, have I conquered the whole land? There's many crops, there's peace. It seems that I'll never have an enemy again. And then Merlin's just like snaking up the stairs, and he goes, oh, enemies are always in the place that you'd least expect them.
Where hides evil then in my kingdom?
Always where you never expect it.
And that kind of sets up the kind of
sets up the next chapter.
Yeah, the next chapter.
And it's interesting because there's this constant reference to a dragon that we never see.
Call your dragon to weave a mist.
Show me more. Show me the dragon.
And there's also the constant reference to the fact that when Merlin is first given the sword and told by Merlin that he is to be king and to be this and to be that, and Merlin's a bit freaked out and he says, I don't want to do this. I just want to be a little squire boy and fucking do my shit. Arthur, sorry.
Yeah.
But he tells him, no, you are the land and the land is you. And befalls you will befall the land, and if you fail, the entire world will fail as we know it. So it's interesting where I feel like the whole movie is a metaphor for fighting your own inner demons. The whole movie, the big thing that all the characters keep harking on about is virtues, and things like honesty and loyalty and this, that and the other. And this dragon that they keep talking about, you never actually see, but they talk about conquering it, and you fight the dragon and you do this and you do that. What happens in the land is a reflection of what you're choosing to do as a person, if you're being virtuous or not. And I feel like it's nearly reflective of like your inner thoughts, like what you think and what you do reflects how you view the world and how you experience the world and navigate through the world. Kind of like you manifest what you think about, sort of thinking. Yeah. And the fighting the dragon, I guess, is fighting your own inner demons, fighting your own anxiety, fighting your own depression, fighting your own impulses, fighting your own lust, or making the wrong decision, or lying and not telling the truth. Yeah. Yeah. So everything's going great, and Arthur decides, I need a wife. So he goes and finds Patrick Stewart's daughter. They've kind of been loving it up the whole time, but in the medieval way, so it's more just like looks as they're passing by in the castle and stuff like that.
Flash a bit of her ankle to him as he passes and wave like that. Yeah.
So they get married, but before they get married, her and Lancelot meet for a second, and it's really good direction because they meet for a second and they just kind of look at each other and then move on. And you immediately know, like, oh, they just fucking fell in love. Like, they're going to fuck. So, they're clearly, like, they kind of, not even flirt, but one day they're walking along, and it's before she's due to get married. And she's asking him, would you ever have a woman? Like, you'll never see you with a woman. And Lancelot, by the way, is like we said before, he's like the L'Oreal commercial. Like, all the girls love him. All the little chambermaids are giggling about him.
Yeah, and before you say that, they're on their horses, and she's having this conversation. And then it just cuts to like a carriage in front, and there's like all girls there, like with tissues, like
they're like, giggling
so
away.
He's deliberately like not
he's
looking at him,
I don't give a
pause.
Shit. He's got beautiful perm.
He does.
So anyway, she asks him, like, I'll never see you with a bird, and he says, She says, is anyone who your heart desires? And he says, yes, you. And
I will love you always. I will love you as my queen. And as the wife of my best friend.
You do think... Why'd you have to say that?
He could have any bird he wants. Like,
no,
why does he have to do that for?
He is a good dude, and he is trying not to.
Yeah, he does try.
Why did you plant the seed in her head? Because, she probably just fancies him at this point, but she'll forget.
No, he does want to fuck her.
Oh, no, of course he does. But it's not like he's playing the long game. He could have fucked her right then, really.
But I get you. He could have just been like, no one. And that would have been...
But it
would have still happened, maybe.
Because at this point, I'm so invested in the bromance between Arthur and Lancelot. Like, they are... You feel like they're best mates. They fucking love each other.
I think they would have fallen in love in the end, simply because of the amount of time that he, as you said, the bromance he spends with Arthur, she's going to be there as his wife. They're always going to be, like, doing...
True.
Yeah, there's no way out of it.
So Guenevere and Arthur get married, and at the wedding we're reintroduced to Arthur's half-sister, and like we got the hint that she was psychic when she had the premonition about her father dying in the beginning of the movie. She's now grown up and she's a fully fledged witch, sorcerer, something or other, not entirely sure what, but she meets Merlin at the wedding.
Do you have the sight? Do you see the future?
Sometimes I dream of things that come to pass. I can ease your loneliness. Let me help you. Teach me.
And they immediately strike up a little friendship / romance. It seems like she's always not just trying to get the magic out of him, but trying to seduce him. And he's curious about it, but also not. Like, the whole way through, like we said, that the movie's kind of, the message of the movie is don't think with your dick.
Yeah.
Merlin doesn't have a libido, or doesn't have a sexuality, I guess, because he's not really human. And he's constantly pulling his hair out because he just doesn't get this thing called lust, and he doesn't get why people throw away the biggest things for what appears to him as just the most stupid and trivial of things. But he seems curious about it, not just from a loneliness point of view, but from a sexual point of view, he seems drawn to it. But it's kind of never quite shown that it's a sexual relationship, but never always hinted at, and it's kind of blurred the lines between the two things. But yeah, so they start becoming friendly. He starts teaching her more about sorcery, and they start plotting. And like you said, Merlin's he is kind of a snaky character, but he's not. He's a complex character. Like he is this all powerful, non-human spiritual being, but he's got quite human motivations a lot of the time. Like he seems at this point in the movie, more than anything, he just kind of seems bored.
Yeah, and I think he generally does, or we generally liked Arthur's dad, I think, and he generally does care for Arthur. But he also likes to fuck with people. Like they'll ask him for advice, and he'll basically give advice in riddles, and Arthur says like loads of times, no tricks or no poems, just tell me it properly, like, because he always like riddle shit.
Like, it feels also kind of like he's nearly got like a parasital type nature where he can't come to Earth and become the king or do this. He has to have someone else act
in his
things and kind of live vicariously through. And I think that's what frustrates him so much, because he's, he just sees people making the same mistakes, and he warns him against marrying Guenevere.
Yeah, he does.
And I think he just sees the son making the same mistakes that ruined the father. And Arthur's evil half-sister starts whispering in the ear of Liam Neeson, who is one of the Knights of the Round Table, and she starts getting it into his head that Lancelot and the wife are having it away.
Yeah, but in the midst of all this happening, they keep having their little round table get-togethers, and Lancelot is
never
suspicious in his absence.
Yeah.
So all the time, Liam Neeson's character's like, we're doing all this, you're giving me his wine to drink for how virtuous he is. He just pours it on the floor. He's basically said, if he's that great and he isn't doing what I've been told, why isn't he here?
Yeah.
I protest my innocence!
Were I not king, I would make you pay with your life for what you've said.
Will you not champion me?
I cannot.
Whatever sort of rule that is in place, the king can't be the one to challenge him. So it has to be Lancelot.
Ha!
Yield to your mercy, Lancelot.
He spares Liam Neeson's life, and it's kind of weird where they basically just decide whoever wins. It's not just for the honour, but whoever wins the fight gets to decide whether or not she was fucking Lancelot.
No, the rules are.
In
this mythology, that's the way it works. So it's not actually possible for anyone telling the truth to lose.
So Lancelot wins the fight, and they all get on, but it doesn't last long because Guenevere's still pissed off that Arthur didn't represent her, and Lancelot says, "Listen, I'm going to go have a sleep in the woods." He sort of gives a look, like winks at Guenevere, and she rides off in the night, and they shag in the woods.
This fucking scene took ages because obviously they're naked and they were actually in the woods. There's about fucking loads of mosquitoes and they keep biting them, so they had to keep stopping it. So it took days on end to like complete, and obviously it's a nighttime scene as well. So
my god,
to be done at night.
Shagging in the woods with mosquitoes buzzing about, it sounds absolutely dreadful.
But while they're doing this, Arthur's clocked it, so he goes up to Merlin. Merlin, you have the sight. Are they together? And he just goes, yes. And then like he just goes straight out to like find them basically.
And you can tell he says to Merlin before, like, "Oh God, am I going to have to kill him?"
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to. Like, he's devastated, but he doesn't want to kill his
friend and his wife,
the two people he loves most in the world. So he goes out there, and as they're sleeping, he pulls up the blade, and you think he's going to kill him, but in the end, he just stabs the blade into the ground.
The king without a sword. The land without a king.
Him giving up the sword and leaving it there is kind of symbolic of the fact that he's going to become depressed, and as a result, the entire land becomes depressed. It kind of reflects how he's feeling and where he is at. There's famine, things fall into disrepute, the castle starts falling apart, and everything just becomes chaotic. And at the same time, his half-sister uses magic to appear to be Guenevere and fucks him and gets pregnant by her half-brother. So anyway, she gives birth in a kind of scene that nearly resembles Frankenstein, because there's lightning bolts going off and loads of prophetic fallacy. But anyway, he'll come later, because in the meantime, you think there's enough story in here for one movie, but no, we get the quest for the Holy Grail.
And what was lost? The Grail. Only the Grail can restore leaf and flower.
Merlin sends all his knights from the Round Table off to different parts of, it seemed like just the country, but I guess the world, and one by one each of them seemed to be dying along the way. But we mainly saw it through the eyes of Percival.
Yeah, this is another thing I really liked about this film, Declan. We first meet Percival when he's just a little peasant trying to catch rabbits, and he's running up to Lancelot to basically beg him to be a knight, and he's so dedicated to it that he walks all the way, which is 20 days, to Camelot, refuses to go on Lancelot's horse. When Lancelot doesn't show up, he says, "I'll defend Guenevere." This is when Percival comes into his own. He's the last one left, and he is so dedicated to the task of finding the Grail. We find out later on he's been looking for it for 10 years and a day just by himself.
And he comes to this tree of death, and it's right next to the lair of the evil half-sister, who kind of now is like on a par nearly with Merlin in terms of capabilities.
Yeah.
We meet this sort of androgynous C-3PO character who I thought was a girl at first as well.
So did I, yeah.
And even the armour I felt like was feminine armour, if that makes sense, in proportions in places.
No, when he put the mask thing on, I thought it was pretty cool, that suit of armour.
Oh, it was really cool, especially once he grows up. But at this point, I think he's like 12 or 13, and he kind of lures Percival back into the lair. So we go through this whole trippy scene where Percival is being attacked by dozens of knights, and he's strung up on the tree. You see in his mind he's going through a castle door and he's seeing the Holy Grail, and he's been asked by it or God or someone what is the meaning of it, but he gets scared and he runs away, and at the same time he's unconsciously rocking back and forth, and the spurs on his boots where he would ride his horse are slicing the rope, and it drops him and he's able to escape. And eventually he gets the Grail, because Arthur is kind of like a Christ-like figure a lot of the time.
Yeah.
In this story, but confusingly, I mean, he's a Christ-like figure who's born of a weird rape, but so not Christ-like in that way, but kind of Christ-like, depending on how you look at the Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he brings back the Holy Grail, and Arthur drinks from it, and it seems to restore him. And he realises that, you know, his white Lancelot was cast off, Guenevere went into hiding, he sent all his best knights to the ends of the earth
to get basically murdered by this crazy
and he's like,
system.
now I gotta be king. So it's kind of like the CSI Miami putting on the sunglasses moment where he's gonna fucking sort shit out.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, his abomination son, the evil half-sister, raises him basically to be the perfect machine for defeating Arthur and taking over the land. He's got this crazy golden suit of armour.
And then he turns up at Arthur's castle, he rides in. And Arthur's still pretty frail at this moment, because aren't they carrying him in a chair?
I think it's less that he's frail, but he's very old now.
Oh, he's just old, okay. They're like kind of carrying him in like a chair, his knights. And he says, "Hello, hi father." Arthur's like, "Show yourself," and then he like opens it and he basically says, "What does he want? He just wants to be king, essentially."
He wants to be king. He basically says, "I want to take everything that's yours."
Yeah.
And Arthur actually says, and I mean, I might have got raped by my own sister to produce you, but I love you. You're my son.
Yeah.
And he offers him an olive branch. And he says, your love is the only thing of yours I don't want. So he's just basically out for... He's got the ultimate daddy issues. He's been raised his entire life, obviously, by his the evil half-sister to hate his father and want to take everything he has. So he's like, fuck that. So we get down to the last battle. And at first I thought they just again pulled out the fog machines. But it was actually, apparently, they burnt nearby trees to produce all the bellowing smoke that you see in this final battle. And it's great, you know, it's intense, and the build up to it when, you know, it's playing that brilliant classical piece of music that really gets you pumping. And the knights are riding out to battle, and you're like, fuck yes, man. Because there's not, the battles are kind of few and far between, but when they happen, it feels like it really means something. It's a fight to the death, and the knights are all fighting. And we've seen Lancelot now as like an old, decrepit man. If you're local to Enfield on the off chance, Lenny the Tramp, picture that if you know what he looks like. And he actually comes across Percival when a group of mob who are angry at how much the land has fallen into decay. They attack Percival as he's returning with the Grail. But anyway, so Lenny the Tramp, aka Lancelot, shows back up in the fight and he starts beating everyone. And he takes a mortal wound. And as he's dying, Arthur and him have this moment where he lets him know that he forgives him. Because that's one of the things as well. It felt like the Holy Grail was symbolic of Arthur learning, once again, fighting his own inner demons, the land and things didn't turn around until he let go of the blame and anger he had against Guenevere and Lancelot. Yeah. Because he suddenly, one of the first things he does when he's restored by the Grail before his son shows up, is goes and finds Guenevere, who's now hiding in a monastery, and he forgives her and he lets her know, he says, I get that me being a king always overshadowed our love, but I hope if I'm ever reborn or in another time from now when I don't have to be king and I don't owe the world anything, that we could maybe meet again somehow.
Yeah, and in this scene now, this is a very key now, Guenevere turns round and literally just pulls out Excalibur, and then Arthur's like, I thought this sword was lost many years ago. If I knew you had it in safekeeping this whole time. And then it's very symbolic, you're like, Arthur is now complete with his trusted blade, ready to take down the incest magical rape son. If you put it that way. Well, that's what he is.
That is what he is.
So, yeah. And then I like this last scene with like Lancelot and Sir Lancelot and Arthur, because obviously I take that he's been disowned by Arthur, which you would be. He's kind of like gone out and gone mad and like disowned, chucked at the castle. He just goes, I just want to die with honour and as a knight. And then Arthur just goes, you are a knight and as you will. I'm like,
oh, it's fucking great. Yeah. As always happens in battles like this, the evil guy and the bad guy, they're slaying through people. Yeah. Basically like cutting through non-important characters like their tissue paper to meet each other in the middle of the battle.
Yeah, like GTA.
So they meet each other, and it's interesting how you're kind of thinking, is there going to be a big fight? But inbred rape son just picks up a spear and just plants it right through Arthur's stomach in the poorest effect in the film, because it's one of those things where 100%. They've just turned you sideways to the camera, and clearly they do like that, and then Arthur kind of just grabs it with his arm.
Yeah,
it's pretty poor, but it's fine.
I take it they probably had run out of a lot of their budget by this.
Yeah, or just did it just winged it in the moment. But as it impales him, Arthur grabs it and pulls it forward again, kind of like the end of the first Lord of the Rings movie. With the sword. So again, pulls him forward, takes his blade and stabs it through the abomination using Excalibur.
Right.
And kills him. How does that fit in with what the mother said about the armour?
I took it as if you're looking at the themes of the film, the mother is so arrogant that she's made this thing so powerful that no sword or no man can ever beat you. And if we're talking about the themes of the film, about your general character and being honest will always win the day. Obviously, arrogance is a very bad trait, and I take it as Excalibur is the sword of virtue and honour, and it pierces through arrogance and hate.
And you can only use it when you are that person.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't until he let go of his blame and guilt and anger that he had towards Guenevere and Lancelot and forgave him that it presented itself again.
Well, he wouldn't have found it if he didn't forgive Guenevere and gone back to her.
So then Percival comes to Arthur as he's dying, and he gives him Excalibur and he tells him, go cast it into a still piece of water. And we see Percival ride off, and he rides off to a lake and he thinks about it, but he can't do it. And then he comes back and Arthur's like, oh, I told you to go do it. So he just rides off and throws it back in the lake, and you feel like that was a bit of a waste of time.
But, you know.
And he launches it and it flies into the
scene
hand
made me laugh.
of this woman's hand coming out of the water.
It's like Terminator, the last scene where it's like...
Yeah! Terminator 2 going into the lava.
Bye, John. Just going down. Yeah, the woman in the lake was a bit naff, this whole...
Well, I preferred the practical way of her, just an actual human hand come out, rather than the dodgy projector screen.
And the reason that Arthur so wanted Percival to chuck it in the lake, he knew he was dying, and obviously this Excalibur is a very powerful sword, and Percival was like, I really don't want to throw it because this is fucking the best.
Saying, what about more men to come on after you, you know?
And he goes, if there's a person of virtue who deserves to be king and to wield Excalibur, they will be able to find this sword. So that is how it is left. Like whoever finds it, by chance, I don't know how it's going to work, they will be the king again. So yeah, very good ending.
Brilliant movie. I fucking loved it. I can't wait to watch it again. I honestly, I feel like this is a movie I'll come back to time and time again, and I can't for the life of me work out why it's not more known. If Lord of the Rings is the Star Wars of the fantasy genre, then this feels like the, I don't know, Aliens.
Yeah.
It's an amazing, sprawling, relentless movie.
Funnily enough, about 3-4 months ago, I actually watched an Arthurian film, The Green Knight, which is on Amazon, which was very good. This is now overtaking it as my actual favourite film dealing with Arthurian legends, so I recommend this fully.
Yeah, I absolutely recommend this. If you're a fan of fantasy, absolutely recommend it. If you're just a fan of movies in general, I would recommend it. If you're a casual movie watcher, then maybe stay clear. But if you love cinema, even just for novelty factor, you will love this movie. It is just such a bizarre trip. And it's the kind of movie that if you made an Arthurian movie today in Hollywood and had a big budget behind it, they would never let you have such, morally ambiguous main characters. Arthur would have to be virtuous the whole time. Lancelot would have to be virtuous the whole time. Merlin would have to just be a wise wizard or just an evil. There'd be no nuance between them. But in this, you just get this crazy, wild, dark, bizarre, hallucinogenic at times trip through medieval England, and it is just fantastic. It is an easy recommendation for Excalibur.